All right. Greetings, brothers. This is Christopher Michael Cooper II from the 4th District. I'm the chairman of the Voter Registration, Education, and Mobilization Initiative. I am initiated 2005 into the Mu Iota chapter, and I am currently a proud member of the Delta Alpha chapter in Dayton and the VREM chairman for the 4th District, Ohio, and West Virginia. This evening, we have a friend here, Judge Marilyn Zayas. We will be speaking with her, learning about her, and you will learn as to why it is important to support her. We have a chance to make history. We have a chance to support someone who is truly thinking about our community. With no further ado, brothers of the 4th District and Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, I would like to introduce to you the Honorable Judge Marilyn Zayas. Good evening, ma'am.
Hi, Christopher. A real pleasure to be here.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much for sticking with us. I want to kind of rehash our very first question. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself, please?
Sure. So I currently serve on the Court of Appeals in Ohio. There are 12 courts of appeals. I serve on the 1st Appellate District. I'm one of the 69 judges who serve on the courts of appeals. I am the first Latina to be elected to a court of appeals, not only in Ohio, but in the tri-state, including Kentucky and Indiana. And so where I sit is I sit in between the trial courts, what I call the Judge Judys of the world, who are making those important initial decisions, and the Supreme Court. So when cases get appealed that are from Cincinnati and Hamilton County, they come to the 1st Appellate District, which is anything that gets appealed, criminal, civil, child support, custody, divorces, car accidents, anything that gets appealed. We actually hear it as a matter of right.
Splendid. So thank you, of course, for joining us this evening. I want to kind of just retouch the question that we were going over. Why is it important that our community stand up for you and support you?
Well, I'm running for the Supreme Court, which is the highest court in the state. And when people come to court, what they're really looking for is a fair opportunity to be heard. And that's really what this seat is all about. To have a fair opportunity to be heard, what that means is that the law should be faithfully applied equally to all, the law and our Constitution. And that should be independent of outside and partisan interests. That's what this fight is really all about. And I believe that this term on the Supreme Court, these 3 seats that are on the Supreme Court, are going to determine the future of Ohio and whether we are going to have more individual rights or less individual rights.
Splendid. So I kind of want to pivot into my next question when we talk about the importance of your candidacy. And of course, we are always looking at who will represent our community, who will shape our community. Clearly, Black and brown, we have similar interests, we have similar struggles. And so I wanted you to kind of touch just a little bit about what makes you truly, when we look at your opponent, what makes you a better candidate and a representative for our community.
As you know, there's a disproportionate amount of Black and brown people that come to court on criminal proceedings, on juvenile adjudication, on what we call delinquency proceedings, and that are also serving sentences in the state prison system. And so, you really want judges that are truly committed to that application of the law and the Constitution equally, without that outside influence. Because the sort of things that come to the court on appeal on criminal cases are things like whether evidence was heard that shouldn't have been heard, whether evidence that should have been heard wasn't heard, whether a law officer's entry into somebody's home or stopping somebody, or the review of somebody's vehicle and the search of somebody's vehicle, whether that was proper constitutionally or improper constitutionally. We also have issues of parental termination. When you look at proceedings where parents are looking at losing their children and their rights to the children permanently, you're also going to see a disproportionate amount of people of color that are in those proceedings losing their rights. So, I will tell you that as a Latina, growing up in a neighborhood, and even my family circumstances, if I said that I had a dysfunctional family, I would be elevating the situation. I really would be. And, and at a time where there was discrimination against Latinas, it really formed my judicial philosophy of understanding that we really are all equal. Because when you're treated as lesser than, then you have to fight that and realize that you're not lesser than. But that also means that no one else is lesser than and nobody else is more than. And that's really what drew me to the law, which is I see the law as the great equalizer. Because if you really are committed to applying it equally to all, that is the best opportunity to have a level of justice that people are seeking, which is that, again, that opportunity to be heard equally, to be treated equally. Before we got disconnected, I was sharing with you that when I joined my court of appeals, it was seen as a rubber stamping court. So attorneys felt that it was futile to take appeals there. My court is a court of I call it, we were here to catch the errors. So it's a decision that was made and somebody's saying there was an error that took place. Either the wrong law was applied or the law wasn't applied properly at all. Or there was some procedure, some error in the procedure within the trial court proceedings. And they're asking us to correct that error. And it doesn't mean that there's always error, but obviously if there is error, you want it to be caught and you want it to be corrected, right?
Yes.
So imagine having a rubber stamping court, that being the reputation, which is not the reputation of my court at all now. There's been a lot of change. And I would tell you my first day, because it's 3 judges, and my court is 3 judges for every case. At the Supreme Court is 7 justices. The first day, I wrote separately what's called a dissent, explaining why the majority, which were the other 2 judges, why they were not proper under the law. I wrote 2 dissents my first day hearing cases as a court of appeal judge. 2. And that's because I knew what I had been hired to do. I look at an election as a hiring. And I was hired to serve everyone and to apply the law and to apply our Constitution. Because when you're talking about individual rights, which is, again, being stopped, police going into somebody's home, it's about those individual rights. Was it proper or was it improper?
Okay. So with that, it sounds like you've been a little bit progressive and you've been willing to do the job. I think it's safe to say that should we vote for you, we're not getting a yes man. I do have times, because I'm fortunate at my position to kind of work with new hires, people getting hired, and there's always 2 types of new people to a team. Those that will just, do what is par, kind of get on board with what's going on and not make waves. And then there's those who may have a more masterful understanding and they're okay with standing up and maybe causing waves or questioning things or challenging things. And I think that that's very important. And I feel like what I'm hearing is that you're committed to doing the job more so than fitting in. And that is probably something that our community really needs. As you talk about your family, uniquely, I've had family members who have had to go all the way up to the Supreme Court and it has failed. And, when we talk about the outside influence, I sometimes think that has greater weight than what we sometimes acknowledge. And I think that is always an issue. So I kind of want to lean into my next question. If I were to come in contact with people who had, come before you, people who have, had to go to, anything with you and, an appeal is successful or not, if I asked them what they felt about you as they stood before you, what do you think they would say, or how do you think they would describe that experience?
I think the number one thing they would say is that they had a fair opportunity. The next thing that they would say is that I am not an outcome determinative judge. So people use the term being a judicial advocate. I will tell you what my definition of a judicial advocate is. To me, a judicial advocate is a judge who has an outcome that they want to get to, and they're just trying to figure out how to get there.
Okay.
The way that I decide cases is I let what was presented in the case, because that's the record, what was presented in the case, not something that's outside of the record. And I let the law and the Constitution guide the case. So not my own, what this is the outcome I want. I want it to be pro this or anti that. And that's what my reputation is. It's like, what you can count on Judge Zayas is that she's going to follow the law. So it's not that you can predict the outcome, is that you can predict that she's going to follow the law.
Right. Because I often ask, I feel like it's kind of dangerous when, if you're here in the city, or even we talk about Supreme Court judges, they have reputations. And so I've always wondered, sometimes people say, oh, that's the hanging judge. If a judge has that kind of reputation, does anyone really get a fair shot if they have an adjective like that, connected to them in their term? So with that, I would ask, as I pivot forward, what do you think about some of the disproportionate sentencing that we're starting to see reform on? And when it comes before you, what could we expect of you?
Right. One thing that is very important when you're talking about the judiciary is public confidence. And part of that is whether it's seen as a political branch.
Okay.
Right now, the confidence, I believe the confidence in the judiciary has been decreasing as of late. And that's very troubling. It's very troubling.
Do you think that that's because of, we have some huge personalities, or do you think that it's because I think all things of political have become so much more divisive? What do you think the key constituents are there?
I think that there's two components that are important with regard to the loss of confidence. One is the questioning of the impact of politics in the decisions that the courts do, and particularly in the Supreme Court, and also the policies that the court either is seeking to adopt or not to adopt. And the second, and this is going to be intertwined, is transparency, accountability and transparency. So I'll use a for example. For example, over 20 years ago, there was a commission that was put together by our Ohio Supreme Court. It was a statewide commission. It was a nonpartisan commission. It included judges, attorneys, people of the cloth, people in the community. And it was to address issues of racial bias, actual and perceived, because they're both dangerous. Actual is obviously dangerous, but so is perceived, right?
Sure.
So there was a report that was put together, and I will tell you that the vast majority of the recommendations in that report, this bipartisan commission put together by the Supreme Court, has not been adopted by the Supreme Court. So that's what I mean by policies. So one of the recommendations is having a sentencing database so that every trial court that does a sentence, that judge would put in the sentence, and there would be certain, because the database, as you know, has different factors or different components. So there would be different things that they would be putting in so that, and it would be public access. So this isn't for attorneys. This isn't for judges. This is for you, Chris, that you would be able to go on the database and say, okay, DUI, nobody gets hurt, first time offender. What is the sentence in Preble County? What is the sentence in the city of Dayton? Okay. What is the sentence in the city of Toledo?
Okay.
Right?
Right.
Well, that came out 20 years ago. That recommendation was made. And it wasn't until a couple years ago that, and it's through the Chief Justice, who's now going to retire, that
Okay.
money was allocated in order to create that database.
Okay. So
And,
I
and I
guess
will
I
tell
would
you
say,
right now, that
okay.
database is at risk because the
Right.
Chief Justice retires, which means whether there will be enough votes to say we are going to adopt this and roll it out so that all trial judges have to use it, put in their sentences, and we're going to make it publicly accessible. It's not going to be an internal process. It's going to be
Okay.
for public access, requires at
Transparent.
least 4 justices out of the 7 justices to vote for that to take place.
Okay. So that could be important so that we could get more objective rulings versus some of the more outlandish rulings that we sometimes see, or even, like I said, the disproportionate sentencing that we see amongst minorities and children in many cases.
So
Um,
it's in transparency.
right, right. And so
Transparency.
I could see
So
that it's vital at many
either they're
different levels.
disproportionate or they're not. You know what I
Right,
mean? Like it'll
right.
speak for itself whether it's disproportionate or not.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and the database has already a prototype has been developed. There's a limited amount of trial judges that are using it. So there's a pilot program right now.
Okay.
But whether that initiative dies on the vine, or whether there's at least four justices who says this is important, and we are now going to roll this out. So it's not just the limited judges that are willing to engage, but that
It's
all
not
judges
optional.
will have to engage.
Right.
That is one of the things that will be determined.
Okay. Yeah, I could definitely see how that's vital. I think about I've got a very close friend. We grew up together, and based on some, I think, outdated laws, outdated thoughts, he is fighting for his freedom. He's appealing right now a sentence of life without the possibility of parole. And while the crime itself is violent, he is not the aggressor. He's almost in a position where he is made to be there. And I think that because he is poor, I think because he is African American, and I know that because he made some bad decisions as a child, I think that because they're not looking at other people in similar situations, they are just looking at him and kind of giving him almost a superficial, harsh ruling. I think that it will impact his life, but I also look at how it impacts his children, how it impacts his family. So I could see the importance of this database because I feel like someone that I know would have a better chance of getting a more fair sentence versus being thrown away. And I think that happens too many times everywhere.
Yeah. And Christopher, there's really 2 components to it. So
Hmm.
there's one as to what is a sentence that is proportionate to the crime so that that person would have an opportunity to pull themselves out of the situation and be a contributing member to society. There's also
Absolutely.
the other end of, is the sentence disproportionate so that somebody that should be serving time and that is going to pose public safety risks are not serving time or being given a much more lenient sentence than what they should be given. See,
Right.
there's 2 pieces to it. So this should not be a liberal versus conservative conversation. This
Right.
should be a conversation about what is best for the entire community.
Exactly.
You see what so
I could.
disproportionate sentences, there's 2 conversations in there. One is, are people getting harsher sentences? The other one is, are people getting more lenient sentences?
Right. Right. And so when we talk about that, I feel like that also kind of gives way to we talk about reformation. There are initiatives out there about defunding the police. Is there any type of progression or even legal reformation that you're looking forward to just as a legal mind in the field?
Um, what I really, I'm because I've been doing this for 6 years, I'm telling you that what I have really learned is the most impact that a judge can do to really advance justice is honestly to apply the law and the Constitution equally. That is the most impactful thing. The next most impactful thing is the policy and the procedures that the court adopts.
Hmm.
So everything from access to the court, information to the public, transparency, those are important procedures. The next component is engagement with the community. And when I say engagement in the community, I'm talking about engagement outside of your judicial function with the community. So like, for example, in my court, when I joined the court, because knowing my background, I realized, like, look, I never dreamt this big. I never, if I talked to my little self growing up, being born in Spanish Harlem and growing up, it was not to be known as Crack City, USA, I would have been like, no way you would be doing this, right? That means that other children are not dreaming their full self. So I created a program for students that they learn about the court system, and I share with them my personal story, because I want children not to see me as special. I'm just a person who happens to be a judge, which means that child, whatever it is that they want to do with their lives, that they feel the confidence that they can do that regardless of what their background and circumstances are.
Absolutely. And that is very important. So with that, I kind of want to wrap up here. So we're getting close to the time here. What do you want us to recall about you when we go to vote? And what do you want us to remember about you?
I want all of your members to know that I truly understand that I'm here to serve everyone. I'm not here to be pro anything. I'm not here to be anti anything. I'm here to serve everybody. Growing up as I grew up, it was very difficult. But what you really, what had happened to me and my brothers is that we really have taken on a life that we want to make. We don't want other people to go through the hardships that we went through.
I understand.
I will tell you, my oldest brother is actually a police officer, and he was actually hit by a drunk driver, and that ended his career. And he also has 9/11 lung disease because he responded to secure the perimeter. My other two brothers are teachers. Okay. And they're very active in the Boy Scouts. And then there's me, and I joke around and say I'm the smart one because I left New York City and came to Ohio 34 years ago. But again, when you have those experiences of knowing what it's like not to be heard, for me, what it did is it really, I have to. I would even say the word compelled. I cannot do anything other than apply the law equally to others, because to everyone. And the reason is because I know that I would be dishonoring the people that come to court if I did otherwise, but I would also be dishonoring that little girl that I still carry inside of me, that all she wanted was a fair chance.
That's very understandable.
And that's
I think you recall there was a time when they told us, you can't be the president because you're not white. You're not a white male. And so we've come a long way. I thank you for all that you shared with us. With that, is there any final words that you would like to share with my brothers all throughout the state of Ohio?
Well, we have a very important opportunity here in this election cycle, because there are 3 seats for you to consider for the Supreme Court. And so there's a real opportunity to be able to, I'm going to say hire, to elect/hire, in these 3 seats, people that are truly committed to serve everyone, and they come from backgrounds that might be not, a little different, not exactly the conventional, or we have our own different pedigree, I should say. But it's an opportunity to really set the direction of our Supreme Court in a meaningful, long-term, sustained way. We have some great justices that have been elected in the last couple cycles. So I'm looking to join those justices that are really committed to moving our state into the best light that it can be. For these gerrymandered maps, that was so critical making those decisions. And that it was 4-3, and it was 4-3 because the swing vote was the Chief Justice, who's going to be gone again, right? Right. So why were people so in tune to that? Because our most fundamental right is the vote. That is our voice. And if there aren't fair maps and a fair opportunity to be fairly represented, then that voice is limited. So these are the sorts of things that are going to come before the Supreme Court in the next term that are going to have a meaningful impact on everybody in the community and what your voice is. So this is our opportunity to really set a direction and to have a Supreme Court that we can be proud of, because it really is striving to serving everyone.
Excellent. Well, with that, I thank you so much, brothers. I hope we've answered all of your questions. If there's an opportunity a little bit later on, if you'd like to come back, we would certainly be open to that. But again, Your Honor, we thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Omega
Yes.
thanks you.
Yes.
It was an
Thank
honor
you
and
for
a privilege.
encouraging everyone to vote the whole ballot. It's important that people vote the ballot from A to Z, and you know, Z is for Zayas, but it's important to vote the whole ballot from A to Z.
Thank you. Thank you so much, ma'am. Grace and peace, and you have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you so much.